Greetings to all. My name is Evgenia Anagnostopoulou, and I'm representing the University of Macedonia in Greece. This presentation, I will share my findings from my study on SDG alignment and environmental performance in the oil and gas sector. This study explores whether and how alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals contributes to measurable environmental outcomes in the oil and gas industry. Aloy will continue this presentation for me. Please feel free to email me with any questions, comments, or clarifications. Thank you.
Hi, this is Aloy. We will continue this presentation together. To guide our investigation, we formulated the following key research objectives. First, developed an SDG Nature Index based on 5 sustainable development goals that are directly linked to environmental protection and resource management. Each company in our sample received a binary score, either 0 or 1, for each goal, depending on whether they referenced it in their disclosures. The total score reflects their overall degree of alignment. Second, we evaluated how SDG alignment influences environmental governance. Finally, we tested whether governance practices translate into actual reductions in their waste, energy use, and water consumption. To empirically test our framework, we constructed a cross-sectional sample of 119 publicly listed oil and gas companies. These firms were selected from a larger universe of over 1,400 companies available in Refinitiv DataStream for the fiscal year 2024. To better capture operational diversity within the sector, we categorized firms into 4 distinct value chain segments: upstream, midstream, downstream, and cross-stream companies. By ensuring this sectoral coverage, we aimed to provide a comprehensive and representative view of how SDG-related governance plays out across the oil and gas value chain. To systematically assess corporate alignment with environmental goals, we constructed the SDG Nature Index. The choice of the particular SDGs was based on the SDG roadmap for the oil and gas sector, developed by the International Petroleum Industry Environmental Conservation Association. Our initial framework considered 6 SDGs, including SDG 14, Life Below Water. However, after testing internal reliability, we found that removing SDG 14 slightly improved the overall consistency of the index. This led to the final index with 5 core SDGs, SDG 6, 8, 9, 12, and 13. The final index is a normalized score ranging from 0 to 1. On average, companies scored 0.69, which indicates that most firms address at least 3 of the 5 selected goals in their disclosures. Firms in our sample show relatively high scores regarding resource use performance and biodiversity impact reduction. This indicates a strong emphasis on environmental governance practices at the policy level. However, when we shift our focus to actual reduction outcomes, specifically in waste, energy, and water, we see a very different situation. These metrics tend to cluster around 0 with minimal variability among firms. This suggests that, despite adopting environmental policies, companies seldom achieve measurable reductions in resource consumption. We then examine the relationships between these variables. The SDG Nature Index reveals a strong positive correlation with the resource use score. Furthermore, resource use performance is positively associated with biodiversity impact reduction and water efficiency policies, indicating some internal consistency in governance practices. However, none of the governance indicators are significantly correlated with the actual reduction outcomes. To better understand the causal relationships among governance practices and environmental outcomes, we applied structural equation modeling. We estimated 3 parallel SEM models, each focused on a different outcome variable: waste reduction and water reduction. At the exogenous level, we included the SDG Nature Index, size as a control variable, and dummy variables for each value chain segment, distinguishing upstream, midstream, downstream, and cross-stream companies. The mediating layer captured governance practices through 3 variables: resource use performance, biodiversity impact reduction, and water efficiency policy. The endogenous outcome in each model was one of the 3 reduction metrics: waste, energy, or water. In terms of model quality, we observed excellent fit statistics across the board. The comparative fit index reached 1.00 in both the waste and water models, and the root mean square error of approximation remained well below 0.01, indicating that the models reliably represent the underlying data structure. This methodology allowed us to trace whether SDG alignment affects internal environmental governance and whether those governance efforts, in turn, lead to tangible reductions in resource use. Now let's turn to the key empirical findings from our structural equation models. First, we see that higher scores on the SDG Nature Index are strongly associated with improved resource use performance. This indicates that firms that actively reference nature-related SDGs tend to implement more structured policies on resource efficiency. There is also a modest positive association between SDG alignment and biodiversity impact reduction efforts, although this result is only marginally significant. Interestingly, we find a negative relationship between SDG alignment and water efficiency policies. Firms with higher SDG alignment scores report weaker water policy initiatives. This suggests possible gaps or trade-offs in policy emphasis. Furthermore, companies operating in the upstream and downstream value chain segments perform significantly worse in terms of resource use governance. These findings highlight structural differences across subsectors in their ability or willingness to adopt sustainability practices. However, despite these relationships at the governance level, none of the three mediators, resource use, biodiversity, or water policy, show statistically significant effects on waste, energy, and water reduction. That concludes my presentation. Please feel free to contact Dr. Anagnostopoulou for any questions, comments, or clarifications. Thank you once again for your time and interest.